world is cracked. The habitable earth is cracked. And we need some major, major transformation if we're going to survive as a species on this planet Earth. I like to play with these mosaic images where you can use a central image, and then for the pixels you can do a whole folder of images. And so I've got a number of these images where I have a central image, and this is the Hokulea, the replica of a Polynesian voyaging canoe in New York Harbor. There's a Statue of Liberty there. That's the photo I took. It's one of my, I love that photo of Hokulea. But I put it here with a bunch of images from climate change, floods, and storms. And I like the image a lot because I think that the Hokulea is just as important a symbol today as the Statue of Liberty. No, I think it's way more important. And the reason is that the Statue of Liberty, what does it stand for? Welcoming people coming to the New World. I have to say that my own family background, my mother's side immigrated from Ireland to escape the potato famine. And we didn't know anything about my father's side until very recently, and my brothers did some research and found out that my father's side came over on the very first boat to the Plymouth Bay colony. And so I take what I have to say about the Statue of Liberty in America seriously. I don't think we are a great nation. I don't know when we were, maybe defeating the Nazis. But then I think America learned the wrong lesson, just as Nietzsche criticized what happened after the Franco-Prussian War, and that the Germans he warned us what was going to happen in Germany. And I think America learned the wrong lesson from victory in World War II. And what does the Statue of Liberty stand for? I think the problem is today is that for many people, it stands for the freedom to simply get as rich as possible. It stands for the most unbridled selfishness, which is exemplified by both political parties to some extent, but at least one party totally. The fact that they were able to elect somebody who had no understanding of the job and who exemplifies the total greed and selfishness, and the fact that so many devout Christians elected the Antichrist is I think our world, our society, our civilization is on the brink of collapse, and it is cracked. Our democracy is cracked because most people never understood the key to democracy. Education is, for most people, just a means to get a job and make money. And we've used this freedom to justify terrible atrocities from the very beginning, not even considering the indigenous people that were already here when we came. I say we because, again, my family was part of the beginning of it all. And so I think the Hokulea is a more important symbol today. We need to learn. That presentation at the Ki Pai Pai was so powerful, and I want to say some more about that as we get into it. This is another image from the Maui fires that show fires from the climate change disaster. And so I think that the desire for wealth, it's very clear that the desire for wealth is one of the main drivers of climate change. The wealthy, their carbon footprint is way more than anybody else, but it's the very drive for wealth itself that pushes the excessive carbon emissions that is leading to the catastrophe that we are facing. And I think most people are still in denial. They don't really know how serious it is. My presentation at Manoa last week, I made the point that most people don't realize that the 90% of the heat from global warming is going into the oceans. And so people think, they don't know, they don't understand how serious it is. So a number of years ago, scientists tried to figure out how much heat is going into the oceans. In 2021, they did a study, and they concluded that it was 14 zettajoules of energy in 2021. And I'm sure you all know what that means, right? Nobody knows what that means, right? And so they explained, get this, they explained that it is equivalent to, this was in 2021, the heat going into the ocean, equivalent to the heat energy of 7 Hiroshima-sized bombs going off in the ocean every second for every minute for the whole year. And from what I understand now, it's like up to 10 in the ocean. 10 Hiroshima-sized bombs every second. So most people don't understand how serious the crisis is. And I think America, in its drive for wealth, is the main source of the problem. It's part of our whole culture, so we have to overcome that. Anyway, that's in the sense that our earth is fractured. Our habitable earth is fractured, and it may become uninhabitable. And in fact, I think it's quite likely that it will become uninhabitable unless there's some major changes. My presentation at Manoa, the punchline of it was that we're all on the Titanic, and we have to find some way to get off the Titanic and on board Hokulea as a metaphor for how dramatic the transformation that is needed. This is one of my vessels in the exhibition, and I make these vessels that are about honoring the earth, honoring this place. They're made in an unusual way in which I throw a closed form, and then I let it dry a little bit, and I turn it over, and I open it up, and I play with the top so it cracks, and it's meant to evoke the volcano landscape. Usually I've done what I'm known for is doing these pit-fired vessels that are colored from the fire. They're in a fire, but I lost the ability to do pit fires a number of years ago, and so I decided for this exhibition, for Emptiness and Form, to work in porcelain. And this piece took an incredible amount of work. I can't even tell you how much time I put into it, just throwing the 50 pounds of porcelain, and then it cracked in the BIS fire. And I thought, well, I guess it's ruined anyway. I'll just put it in a high fire and see what happens. And it opened up and it split like this. And I thought, well, actually, that's pretty appropriate for the theme of the conference, for the theme of the show, the Emptiness and Form exhibition, that our world is cracked. The habitable earth is cracked. And we need some major, major transformation if we're going to survive as a species on this planet Earth. I also want to introduce you. Last year, the CCPC was in Bogota. Some of you were there, and we have Gustavo Perez, our host, who's here. I'm so glad to see you here, Gustavo. It was a very intense trip for me. When I first got there, I didn't get much sleep, and I woke up the first morning there, and there was a message saying a number of people were walking to the university because there was some art event happening. And I was going to try to sleep in, but I thought, I guess I'll get up and do that. And it was about a mile walk downtown Bogota. And then it was a steep climb up to the conference site. And I barely made it up there, and I was like dying. And then when I get there, there was this young woman, Evelyn Pineros Quintana, demonstrating her whistling bottle, her flutes. And so throughout Latin America in pre-Columbian times, you find these flutes that were made, and you put water in one side and you tip it, and it whistles, right? And she was demonstrating that, and she had a pretty serious presence about her. And I talked to her, and I found out, she does something. What I like about what she does something serious with her art, with her ceramics. They're kind of shamanistic in a way, and she later. At the end of the conference, I took this photo of her. At the end of the conference, all the artists had a chance to explain their work. And she explained that this was about her father, who had died the previous year. And when he was a young child, he couldn't speak well because he had a tongue problem, and he could only make an ocarina with his hands and communicate with the birds and the frogs. And he tried to teach her to do that when she was a child, but she never could do it. And then after he died, she decided to make this ceramic flute. And she's really talented in painting, illustration. She's relatively new to ceramics, but she made this piece, and it just impressed us all. We invited her for this art exhibition, and we really tried to get her here. We could not get her a visa. The whole U.S. Embassy thing and this, the welcoming of the Statue of Liberty to people, is an illusion today, right? And we did our best to try to get her here, but she did send us a piece, which I will explain a little bit later. I want to say something read something from the catalog about the piece that she sent us. And she also, her thesis, defense at the university there, she called it an auscultation for a wounded earth. And I was blown away by that. And I had to look up the word auscultation. I didn't know what that meant, and that's a term, a medical term for when a doctor is listening to your heartbeat with a stethoscope. Anyway, her pieces are about this. She said, this is her description in the catalog. Throughout the unfolding narrative of Singing in Reverse, Auscultation of a Wounded Earth, an investigative exploration into forced disappearances in Colombia. I thought her work was about the wounded earth was wounded because of environmental stuff, but it's more than that. It's about the forced disappearances in Colombia, and I would say throughout much of Latin America, again, partly because of our funding of our military and our support for right-wing dictatorships that has led to such violence throughout Latin America and other places around the world. So she continues, I have been immersed in crafting clay flutes that resonate with water, each imbued with specific attributes drawn from the rivers and lakes that inspire them, as well as the poignant tales of searching families and witnesses of these tragic events. I believe that the water has its own voice and that the emptiness has a sound. It could be very noisy. On this occasion, the flute presented here is inspired by the story of a Magdalena River fisherman, Jose. Jose sailed while playing a rusty harmonica. In his workday, he used to fish cachama, but one day he also fished bodies that had been thrown into the river. He retrieved them from the river and gave them a burial. In the midst of the exercise, Jose lost his harmonica in the river. The harmonica disappeared. The ceramic piece resonates with the spirit of the Magdalena River and is an interpretation of its melodies in Jose's harmonica voice. The river also sings about its own pains. I invite you to play the flute. To do so, fill it with water, hold it carefully, and gently shift its weight from one hand to the other as you play. She did this auscultation, her undergraduate thesis. This is an image from it. She had this spiral of earth in this room, and she placed a number of these vessels along the spiral, and in the center there's a large vessel with water, and she would go up and she would pick up one of the vessels and put some water in it and then hand it to somebody on the circumference. And she did this repeatedly till the 7 vessels. She gave it to the first person, and they would start working it in the sound, and the second person, till eventually you had 7 people working this. And that's the auscultation of a wounded earth that she did. Anyway, I thought it was just an amazing thing. Can art help us and be part of the healing? Can art make a difference in our society? Is it just for decoration? Is it just for investigating formal properties? Since the birth of art, art can be so many things. But I think the highest aim of art was what Nietzsche suggested in The Birth of Tragedy. The highest aim is its capacity to change us. And I really like her work because she's trying to do that. So the Heart Sutra. This is a wonderful piece in the exhibition. Was shared with us by Mayumi Oda, who's a legend here on the Big Island. She was a young girl in Hiroshima when the bomb went off, outside of Hiroshima, I guess, and she was witness to that. And she's a legend on the Big Island. She was a social activist in the 60s here, and she graced us with this wonderful silk screen of the Heart Sutra. you'll see that the calligraphy, when you look at it up close, it's just so beautiful. The gold calligraphy in it is amazing. And so that leads me to say something about the Heart Sutra. Here's a more easier, clear to see text. A little bit about the Heart Sutra. For those of you not familiar, most of you are familiar with it, but the Heart Sutra is considered the most important text for Mahayana Buddhism. Let me just read to you just a quote from Donald Lopez, a scholar, and that the most famous text in the Prajnaparamita literature. So the Heart Sutra is the most famous of the Prajnaparamita texts. It came from India, a Sanskrit text that are the beginning of Mahayana Buddhism. And the most important, Donald Lopez says, is known as the Heart Sutra. And the heart of the Heart Sutra, the most famous and most problematic section of the text, according to Lopez, is this passage. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Sharaputa, in that way, all phenomena are empty, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, undiminished, unfulfilled. And in this image, we see the famous line, the most famous line, form indeed is emptiness, emptiness indeed is form. And so when the Bodhisattva is explaining this teaching of shunyata, this prajnaparamita, this profound wisdom of emptiness, he begins by saying that, by referring to ourselves, and in the Buddhist analysis, there's 5 parts of the self. So actually this line, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, is really not paradoxical if you understand that the word form is simply the word, a translation for rupa, which is really referring to our bodies. And so it's the least problematic part of the sutra, in my opinion, because if we really examine and think about our bodies and where does it come from, our bodies are obviously empty of substantial existence. The Sanskrit term svabhava means own being, inherent existence, and that our bodies are the most obvious example. I always ask my students, think about the body that you have today. Where does it come from? There's what your parents contributed, and then there's all the sustenance that you've taken in since then, right? And where does that come from? Where does the food come from? Where does the drink come from? And you begin to get this idea of the radical interdependence that is the profound wisdom of emptiness. And so it's actually the more radical part was when the Bodhisattva goes on to say the same is true of all the other parts of the self, including, finally, the last part, vijnana, consciousness. And that would have been the part that would have been most radical at the time, because in the Upanishadic worldview, consciousness, sometimes connected with the Atman, is that which never was born and never passes away, which does not exist in interdependence. And so the Buddhist teaching, going back to the central teaching of Buddhism, dependent origination, is a rejection of this hypothesis. And it's an interesting question. Why did the Prajnaparamita Sutras arise in the first place? Why was this strange teaching of emptiness necessary if the Buddha already had this teaching of interdependence? And there's a lot of different explanations for that. And I kind of wonder if part of it, because there were some schools of early Buddhism that did an analysis to suggest that the smallest parts, the smallest things that exist, the dharmas, they use that term, have own being. And so the Prajnaparamita Sutras that say, no, everything is empty of own being. And so that's the importance of the teaching of the Heart Sutra. One of the most interesting things about it, this is that the Heart Sutra, of course, was part of this Prajnaparamita literature that came from India to China and gets translated into China. But a radical thesis came out a number of years ago. There's this book, The Heart Sutra, by Kazuaki Tanahashi. And I think it's a really great book on the Heart Sutra. And in there, he mentions an apocryphal text. Let me read this. He says, in 1992, Jean Nattier, a professor at Indiana University, published a startling paper entitled The Heart Sutra, a Chinese apocryphal text. Her thesis was the Heart Sutra was actually first put together in China as an abbreviation for the larger Prajnaparamita Sutras. And the interesting thing is that Jean Nattier was actually at Manoa. I remember her when I was a graduate student, and I remember hearing about this thesis, and being Sanskrit scholars, we were like, what is she talking about? Like, the Heart Sutra was really written and it was originated in China. So her thesis was basically that the Heart Sutra is an abbreviation of the vast Prajnaparamita literature. And her thesis is that it copies, the Heart Sutra shows that it was based on the Chinese text, the Chinese translation of the larger Prajnaparamita Sutras. Right? And Kazuaki ends up concluding a little bit later, he says, I myself believe that Nattier presents a revolutionary finding in the origination of the Heart Sutra by her careful and thorough argument. Because of her work, scholarly understanding about the history of the Heart Sutra will never be the same. In summary, I agree with Nattier that the Heart Sutra was compiled in China. It's a very radical thesis, and it's just kind of interesting that it's so radical and controversial because, of course, if it was compiled in China, that means the Buddha didn't write it. Right, and they have to think that all texts have to go back to the Buddha. You know, this a naive notion, I think, that we can't do better than the Buddha. You know, nobody can improve on the Buddhist teaching. It's like the Christian idea that the Word of God is only in this ancient text. Only one text is the Word of God. Anyway, I think it's just a footnote, an interesting side note to the story of the Heart Sutra that it actually may have been compiled in China. Anyway, this is the most famous line, and it's again referring. The form here is the translation for the word for the body, and then after he explains that all the 5 parts of the self are empty of own being, he goes on to say that all dharmas, in Sanskrit here, all dharmas are empty, are marked with this emptiness. And they use the word dharma is such an important word. It, is used for and capitalized in Buddhism. It refers to the teachings of the Buddha, but they used it in small, uncapitalized to refer to anything, like breaking down reality into its smallest parts, which they just use the word dharma. I always joke with my students that it's sort of like in Hawaii. There's slang. We say dekine, to refer to something, to refer to anything. And so I think that the Heart Sutra could be abbreviated. So the Heart Sutra is an abbreviation, a very condensed abbreviation of this vast Prajnaparamita literature. Part of her argument is also, the textual evidence is the strongest part, but part of it is that, the Indians were long-winded. They wrote long texts, and the Chinese wrote, short little poetic texts like the Lao Tzu, and so for somebody to condense the Heart Sutra and the Prajnaparamita teaching into this very condensed text is a Chinese thing, and I joke with my students that maybe condensed even further if all dharmas are empty, to say in local slang, they say, hey, brah, what's happening? Brah, like brother or something, or they use it all the time. And so I would say that it's all dharmas, I would say, dekine empty, brah. That's the Heart Sutra. Anyway, so the idea is that with that you can get, if you get the Heart Sutra, it leads to this complete, unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment. And then we have the famous mantra of the Heart Sutra. So one of my works in the exhibition is about trying to draw attention to the fact that it's the body. And I made this porcelain sculpture by doing an original and then doing a plaster mold of it and then pressing thin porcelain. I wanted to get a really fragile, thin, mask-like face, and the back of it has this thing on it. Anyway, from moving from Buddhism to Nietzsche, Nietzsche emphasized this idea about the greatest, the secret to life is to live dangerously, build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius. And I think that, that what he meant by that, the context of it, is that living dangerously means we have to overcome the values of the past. And for Nietzsche, the main problem with the values of the past is that the earth is not our home. With the longing for an eternal world, the earth becomes not our home. It becomes a place to be used up and left behind, a wasteland, right? And so Nietzsche's whole theme, and thus spoke Zarathustra, remain loyal to the earth, is about that. And so I emphasize, here's another image of Gabriel sitting on the edge of the crater after the last conference when it opened up, that we have to live on the edge and overcome the values of the past if we're to overcome the climate crisis. And I love this image of the famous Dionysian Kylix, which illustrates for Nietzsche, I think, the power of art to transfigure. It tells the story behind it is that Dionysus is sailing across the Mediterranean, and he's captured by pirates, and they don't know who he has until grapes pop out, vines pop out from the mast, and he turns the pirates into dolphins. And so the eternal recurrence, I think, for Nietzsche, I think it's not meant to be a truth about what really happens after death. I don't know what happens after death. I don't pretend to know. I think it's a thought experiment to stop this longing for another world, to say yes to this world, to this moment. And so I think that's the main point of Zarathustra. And I think it connects with Dogen, Nietzsche's famous thought of amor fati, to be capable of accepting and accept the tragic condition that we're in and not long for something else, to say yes to this moment. And this is why I think the Hokulea is so important, because the Hokulea, it's been taking this message around the world that we need to malama honua, take care of the earth as our home. And I think this is a powerful image I got on their website, because it says, Hawaii, our special island home, is a place where the land and sea are cared for and people and communities are healthy and safe. And I found this picture so ironic because that's West Maui, and off the port bow at the tip of the island, that's Lahaina, which burned, left in ashes. Anyway, so I think that what I really liked about the Kipaipai, if you really got what she was saying, is that what's most radical about the Hawaiian view is that the earth is an elder, it's a family relationship between humans and the earth. And she was getting that. And when we were looking across the crater, there was that pu'u on the ground that we could see, and the eruption, which is currently ongoing, was right on top of that, right beyond, right just outside the caldera. So that was just a chicken skin moment for me. It was such a powerful thing if one understands that. And so my vessels have been trying to draw attention to this and trying to draw attention to the sacred earth and to saying yes to this moment and this earth, and that's what they're about. And here I have a picture of one of my vessels next to Hygeia, the Greek goddess of healing. And so that's why that is there. And here's another one of my vessels. I like the way they displayed that. And it cracked too, and I filled the crack with lacquer and gold leaf. And I just want to say that another cool thing is that most people, the gold is like, the problem with our society is this pursuit of wealth, and like people want to live in golden splendor. Nietzsche offers us a different metaphor for gold. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, it's a metaphor for a love that is a gift rather than an investment. And that's why I used it in this piece. And this is Evelyn's little brief video about the auscultation of a wounded earth. It's going to be on display in the gallery, or it is on display.
nos contaría bastante parecido.
Anyway, that's her piece. I'm going to close with it. She sent us this piece. And unfortunately, it arrived all broken, and I put it together. And unfortunately, I think it still leaks, so it doesn't work with water. I was going to try to work it with water, but this is really cool. Listen to this. She's got a harmonica in there.